Sure, I mean, we can go there. I mean, for me, when I say we, I mean black women, have always been a moment of inconvenience or convenience for the feminist movement, right? Has Oprah ever mentioned her interest for running for president before this?
Where do we go from here?
At the 75th Annual Golden Globes Awards, Oprah Winfrey accepted the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement. Wearing black in solidarity with sexual abuse victims, Miss Winfrey called out the sexual exploitation of Hollywood, the overall misogyny in American culture, and asserted her position with the Me Too and Time's Up movements. Her rousing speech was met with much jubilation as her peers in the motion picture industry rose to their feet and gave her a standing ovation. The internet was set ablaze. Everyone weighed in. Various media outlets, stars the likes of Meryl Streep and Kathy Bates voiced their support for a potential presidential run. Others took to the internet to post pics and create memes expressing the same sentiments, with Michelle Obama as vice president or Oprah Winfrey as president, or vice versa. Liz.
Yes.
How did you interpret Oprah's speech as a woman, a black woman, as an American, and as a Republican? Can you unpackage all that
hot mess?
All of that.
Well, frankly, that was a staged event, all of it. And unfortunately, that's where we are when it comes to our pop culture. Let's start with being a woman, wearing all black in solidarity of the Me Too movement. All of that was fake. Half those people in the room know exactly how horrible Hollywood and also politics have been when it comes to people in power taking advantage of people who are trying to gain any sort of footing, especially in Hollywood. Some of the recipients we found out right afterwards were the main proponents and abusers in the community, and they knew about it.
Right.
And so every single woman, sadly, it's almost as if they're staged Hollywood extravaganza for Me Too were like multiple slaps in the face of people who actually were the subjects of sexual abuse.
So it's sort of like what Dave Chappelle said. Basically, they were a part of the heist but didn't like their cut.
Sure, exactly. Well, it's all. If anything you want to say, it's propaganda. To deflect the problems that we're actually facing and seeing. If people were really concerned, absolutely concerned, they would have stopped all of this abuse decades ago, but they hadn't.
Because the casting couch didn't happen with Bill Cosby.
Absolutely, they didn't, and that's unfortunately we have to mention that.
Yeah.
And that if he allegedly, I don't know if it was convicted or not, had been taking advantage, drugging, whatever he was doing since the 70s.
Right.
70s, 80s, 90s. That means that 20 years after he started doing that, he had one of the top shows of all time.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, we see it in politics, with the person who ran for Senate, Moore, he was
Alabama.
In Alabama. He went through the judgeships. He had so many different positions over the last 20, 30 years. Who was doing the opposition research on him? They knew exactly what was going on, and they supported him.
The white women were like Tammy Wynette, Stand By Your Man, when it came to Judge Roy Moore. They voted ideology, party, over their own gender.
Well, and also I do think that it was this nature of we can just demolish something while pushing our agenda. And going back to, the speech that Oprah made, if you unpack her speech, world audience, one of the, if not the most popular, televised known entities in the world, Oprah Winfrey, blessings to her. However, that entire speech was written to proliferate a certain paradigm. She went back to slave time. She went back to when there was exploitation of, black actors and black actresses and speaking in a way that, like, if you're the most powerful woman in the world, pretty much, when it
Right.
comes to entertainment, it's almost as if she was taking away from her own personal accomplishments, knowing that an entire generation has been influenced specifically by her as one individual.
Right.
So I just wish that when we have these opportunities to really speak our truth, that we speak to enlightenment, not degradation. And so that's ultimately, I don't know which one it was, a woman or a black woman.
No,
or
as a woman, I want to hear your opinions as a black woman,
Right.
because, historically being a black woman and being a woman in American society has been, two
sure.
different realities.
Sure, we can go there. I mean, for me, when I say we, I mean black women, have always been a moment of inconvenience or convenience for the feminist movement, right? So back in the 60s, I dropped out of my women's lib class specifically because of the BS, right? Where they were like, oh, we're talking about these ideas, but the moment that you're trying to push this forward, you're not willing to include women of color.
Right.
And not only that, they speak, and they still to this day speak as if they're women, code word white women.
Right.
And then we as minorities, we are othered all the time in this narrative, especially like, say, for instance, the equal pay, right?
Right.
We got to get equal pay for women. It's like, do you realize that white women are still paid more than black men? If you use those numbers,
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
To really talk about it, right?
To really talk about it, really talk about injustice and inequality. But instead of that, they want us to ignore the fact that we walk through this world in a very, we're like a kaleidoscope as black women. We are women, we are black women, we are, mothers and wives, and we don't back down from those cultural norms. On their side, they don't want to be known as mothers and wives and, and in a subordinate sort of mentality. So I think that when we have someone like Oprah, they are totally willing to take advantage of her, but is she, even as high as she's been able to achieve, is she still considered an equal? That's the ultimate problem.
I mean, because when you really watch Oprah's show and pay attention to her audience, Oprah always talked to white women, and her show was packaged in a way that it appealed to white women. So,
well, hey, who's available to watch her show at 4 p.m.? We're still at work.
I'm
sorry. We're still at work, right?
Right. We're still at work.
And that's the just truth.
Mothers preparing dinners for their children, getting ready to, all these other things. But it goes back, as you would say, to American culture, because even on the plantation, the white woman gave birth to heirs and the black woman gave birth to property.
Right.
And also during the 18th Amendment, the voting rights for women, a lot of white women accuse black women of being too race conscious.
Right.
Because
it's confusing. It's confusing the situation.
The situation, because black women are voting in the interest for, or when they do obtain the right to vote, they're going to support race issues.
Right.
Because they're so wedded to their community and their men in a way in which
Yeah.
white women benefited from the same exploitation and disenfranchisement of black people as her white counterpart.
Right, and it's weird too that we talk about it. It's like we're talking black white, but it really is Anglo and other. The Anglo culture tends to be focused on the nuclear family.
Correct.
But when you bring in other cultures that have more of a family-focused environment, Italian Americans, Irish Americans, anyone who believes your role is not just for the individual, but to support the family and community, most people think of the unit before they think of themselves.
Right.
And so when you have movements, for example, especially now or otherwise, the only way that you can, galvanize public opinion is to create some sort of one thought. So if you have this one idea, for example, Me Too, let's all wear black, let's all speak out. But the moment that you have someone like Rose McGowan that's saying, this is really how it happens, you cannot have discord, because the moment that you have another option, it distracts from galvanizing and controlling public opinion. So if anything, Oprah's speech was another, again, event to galvanize support over one concept. And so what you see is hyper focus on Oprah and her speech and all eyes on her and that event, no coverage on the thousands of other tweets talking the real truth about what's going on in our reality.
Yeah. As a Republican, how did you look at this speech taking place in uber liberal Hollywood that your ideology tends to hate? Or dislike. I don't want to say hate. That's a strong word.
Hate is a strong word.
But disagree with.
Well, if
vehemently.
anything, as Republicans or as conservatives, or I could say non-Democrats, non-registered Democrats, independents, Green Party, everybody else that's not a party toter of the Democratic Party sees the reality. We all know how, again, going back to it, you only can control a narrative if you have created a shared experience. This event was a shared experience to push forward an ideology or a paradigm. And the paradigm that the Democratic Party wants to achieve is, oh, look at us. We support the blacks. We support the black woman. Look how great we are. And you're like, okay, we awesomely love Oprah. She's great. But what in her profession, education, experience shows that she can be the leader of the free world?
Right.
And the only thing that she, unfortunately, at this time portrays is an image. And the average American, specifically Republicans, are sick of just using images.
But I thought the Republicans liked the image of someone who was able to pull themselves up from their own bootstrap, become an individual capitalist, and gain success in our capitalistic economy.
Right. And when you do that, that should be your decision first and foremost. Like Mark Cuban, for example. Mark Cuban, same person. Like, I mean, I don't know. Of course, we don't know that I don't know what his backstory was, but multiple times he's spoken by the fact that even though he is a multimillionaire, he might run for president. Has Oprah ever mentioned her interest for running for president before this? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Right. So if she hasn't made that...
People may have projected her running for president or may have talked about it, but I haven't seen anything with her omitting that, I would like to run for president.
Right. So short of that, if there isn't that interest or that sort of, it's not even aspiration, but just option for the average multimillionaire, now that we have 5, it only can be fabrication.
Right.
And that's the issue that we have.
Right. Which sort of is a good segue to the next question. Since actors and actresses lend their star statuses and finances to political parties, are celebrities gaining more influence over the election process than seasoned politicians?
Hillary's election was so lackluster when it came to the average citizen, the average voter, that they went so ham on the celebrity bit. Like, they were like, this thing is so milquetoast that we have to put sprinkles and butterflies and unicorns in order for anybody to like this. And so